Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the tragic death of Stuart Lubbock, who died in March 2001, almost 20 years ago, at the home of TV presenter celebrity Michael Barrymore in England. This happened in Roydon in England, and as I say, Stuart was tragically found dead by the side of the swimming pool at the home of a very famous person in this country in England, Michael Barrymore.
The hours of the 31st of March 2001, paramedics and police were called to the home address of Michael Barrymore in Roydon and Essex. There they found Stuart Lubbock, who was recovered and taken from his swimming pool, where he then taken to hospital, where he later then died. This case has been a mystery for almost 19 years. Together with Terry, we are absolutely committed to try and find the people responsible. 9 people returned to Michael Barrymore's address in the early hours of that morning, following being at a local nightclub, where a party then took place. Stuart died during that party. 1 or more of those 8 people know who's responsible for Stuart's death. I'm equally convinced that those people present at the party must have spoken to friends, family, associates about what happened that night, and I urge them to come forward. So part of today is we've teamed up with the charity Crime Stoppers, and between Essex Police and Crime Stoppers, we are offering £20,000 reward for the arrest, leading to arrest and conviction of those involved.
What might have been potential pieces of evidence that have gone missing?
Yeah, sure. So obviously police were called to the scene at the time. I think the initial information that was passed to Essex Police suggested that it was a straightforward drowning and an accidental death. We did put a scene guard on. Unfortunately, there were a number of people that were allowed back in that scene during the early hours of the 31st. We took crime scene photographs quite early on, which showed a couple of particular objects that I'm really interested in to find out where they are now and to recover them. The first was what appeared to be a pool thermometer that was on the side of the jacuzzi. And the relevance being that we believe in the early hours there were individuals that went into the jacuzzi, including Stuart. Subsequently, obviously, he was found in the pool. We also know from officers there that what appeared to be an outhouse handle or poolside handle was found broken again very close to that jacuzzi. Both those items we have never recovered.
But were they photographed at the time?
The pool thermometer was photographed initially by crime scene photographers. The handle was not seen in those photographs, but was described by officers that were present near to that scene. The following day, we conducted a crime scene video, which was quite standard practice. And during that crime scene video, those items were missing. And we also know that from all the items seized in the property, and we searched bins, etc., they've never been recovered. And I'm really, really interested to find out what happened to them. There were a number of people at that property. There were items there that we've done a full search of that property from a policing perspective. Those items have gone missing. Yes, that does raise my suspicions. Possibly could be used in the assault that took place on Stuart. So I'm really keen to identify to see whether or not they are relevant to this inquiry.
How big a failure is it for the police once you get those objects?
In every single criminal investigation, we do our utmost to try and secure crime scenes. It's really important to us. I think what took place that night was some early bias on behalf of the officers that attended, just naturally believing this was a drowning and not what we expect to find these days, that we think murder first and then work our way back.
I've been wanting to cover this case because it's a case that's fascinated me for the last 20 years, and as of today, March the 17th, there has been breaking news across all of England today that a man aged 50 from Cheshire in England has been arrested, maybe not on suspicion of murder, but arrested in connection with the murder of Stuart Lubbock. Now, this is very interesting, as the finger has often been pointed at Michael Barrymore, whose house this person was, or Stuart was found dead at. Not only that, the finger of suspicion has been pointed at Michael Barrymore's ex-partner, or could it have been one of the 7 guests that were at the house that night? It's an extremely fascinating case. As I said, there are so many strange elements to it, cover-ups and police bungles, all sorts of things that went wrong could go wrong. And sadly, 20 years later, it will be 20 years on March the 31st in about a fortnight, Stuart's family and friends still don't know what happened to him. I'm really hoping that today's news that someone has been arrested could bring a conviction in this case, and finally it won't be a cold case any longer. Let's all hope it's going to be a solved case.
Wednesday the 17th of March, detectives from Essex Police's major crime team have arrested a 50-year-old man on suspicion of the indecent assault and murder of Stuart Lubbock. The man, who was arrested in Cheshire, continues to be questioned by our detectives. Following the arrest, we immediately notified the Lubbock family. This arrest is almost 20 years to the day in which Stuart was found unconscious in a swimming pool following a party at a home in ROYDON. He later died in hospital. The arrest comes after significant new information came to light following our renewed appeal for information and offer of an enhanced reward, which coincided with a major TV documentary broadcast in February 2020. This information has led to us making an arrest, and over the coming days we will be contacting all those who were present at the party at the time, as well as others who may have information. As we stated last February, and have continually stated over the last 20 years, we believe someone or some people at that party know what happened. It is important to restate the fact that Essex Police has never given up on this case, and that the force is motivated by the desire to deliver justice for Mr. Lubbock and his family. Extremely lengthy and complex investigation, which has spanned over 20 years and remains ongoing. We have never given up on finding out exactly what happened to Stuart, and we will not stop in our pursuit of justice for him and for his family and friends. As we said a year ago, and have repeatedly said over the last 20 years, 9 people were at that party. We know that not everyone was responsible for what happened, but someone was. Now is the time to come forward, if you haven't done so already, to set this matter to rest by providing us with any information you have. Thank you very much.
Now first I'd like to give you all a bit of background about Michael Barrymore. If you don't live in England, maybe you're not aware of him. He was an extremely famous celebrity here in the 80s and the 90s, presenting TV shows, entertainment shows, often on a Saturday night. It was primetime TV, and back in the days of the 80s and the 90s, especially before cable TV and satellite TV came around, and a lot of people still didn't have it into the 90s. A lot of people here in England only had 4 or 5 TV channels, therefore that made Michael Barrymore a lot famous than perhaps he would have been nowadays. He was a much loved celebrity. He was one of the highest paid earners in this country, in the entertainment world, and I would compare him at the height of his career to someone like Oprah Winfrey. He really was a massive, massive celebrity in this country. As I said before, Michael Barrymore was an extremely famous TV presenter. He did numerous shows. One of the most famous was Strike It Lucky, one of my favourite shows from back in the day. He also did another show called My Kind of People, and Celebrity Big Brother was one of the later shows that he did when he was trying to get a comeback to bring his career back after this tragic murder had occurred. Now, after the murder occurs, Michael Barrymore did never get his TV career back. No one at ITV, the channel that he used to work for, wanted to do shows with him, and his career was over. Now, he does come second in Celebrity Big Brother, which was quite good. He was still quite a funny person and quite entertaining, but the sort of dark cloud that hangs over him because of the death of Stuart Lubbock meant his career was over in England. Now, let's start from the beginning of what happened on the night that Stuart died. On the night that Stuart died, he'd gone out clubbing with his brother to a nightclub called the Millennium Nightclub, and that is located in Harlow in Essex, and that's in England. On the night, he meets Michael Barrymore, and I think he's quite starstruck from meeting Michael Barrymore. Just to point out now, Stuart Lubbock had been married. I'm not sure if he was divorced or separated, but he was no longer with his wife, and he did have 2 children. He was 31 years old, and he was from Harlow in Essex in England. Now, Stuart very much enjoyed going out clubbing, and that night his father drove him and his brother to the nightclub that they went to. Later that night, as I said, Michael Barrymore arrives, and I imagine a lot of people in the nightclub were starstruck by his presence. Stuart begins to talk to him, and he eventually is separated from his brother and ends up going back to Michael Barrymore's house. Now, just to say, when Michael Barrymore does arrive at the nightclub, he's with his partner. Now, they have some kind of row and they are separated. Later, Michael Barrymore, as I said, goes back to his house with Stuart Lubbock, but a few other people join them. Later that evening, the boyfriend that he's having a row with, Michael Barrymore, turns up and another row ensues at the house. The boyfriend turns up with two females, two ladies that he's brought from the club. Now, Michael Barrymore's partner at the time was a drag queen called Jonathan Kenny. Just to point out, as far as everybody knew, Michael Barrymore had children and was a happily married man. Now, I believe he'd been hiding his sexuality for some number of years, as in the 80s and 90s, very sadly in the country that I live in, celebrities didn't feel they could come out as being gay. He did later come out as being gay and began to live his life as a gay man, and as I said, his partner was called Jonathan Kenny. Now, I'm going to go through the names of the people that they meet at the nightclub that eventually end up back at Michael Barrymore's house, so give me a chance, because I don't know all their names off by heart and I want to make sure I get it right. There was a brother and sister called Justin and Kylie Merriott. They went back to Michael Barrymore's house that night. There was also someone called James Futers and Simon Shaw. Now, I believe Michael Barrymore already knew some of these people, but some of these people, including the person that died ultimately, Stuart Lubbock, hadn't met Michael Barrymore before. So I imagine most of them would have been quite starstruck meeting him. There was also someone called Claire Jones and someone called Kelly Campbell there that night. Now, Kelly and Claire are brought there by Jonathan Kenny, Michael Barrymore's partner, and Justin and Kylie Merriott, James Futers, Simon Shaw, and the person that died very tragically were there that night. And like I said, they don't all arrive together. Some of them turn up later that night, three of them, the partner of Michael Barrymore and the two girls, Kelly and Claire. But James Futers, Simon Shaw, Justin and Kylie Merriott, and Stuart Lubbock all arrive back at the house with Michael Barrymore. Now, I believe they all arrive in taxis and they start to have a party at Michael Barrymore's house. Drugs are being consumed, alcohol's flowing. From what I can gather, I think Michael Barrymore was trying to get a bit frisky with Stuart, and from what the other people said that were there that night, he wasn't really very interested in Michael's advances. Now, I'm not sure if the reason Michael Barrymore and his partner had a row in the club and become separated was because Michael Barrymore had set his sights on Stuart. Maybe he didn't know Stuart wasn't gay or bisexual and thought that he was going to pull him that night, as we say in England. Now, at about 2:30 in the morning, they all head back to Michael Barrymore's house, and from what I can gather, Michael Barrymore and his partner arrive at the club sometime between midnight and 1 in the morning. Now, by 5 in the morning, Michael Barrymore claims to have found Stuart dead in his swimming pool. Extremely, extremely tragic for Stuart and all of his family. Now, it's not certain whether he had actually drowned or died in the swimming pool. That's still disputed, as the verdict at the inquest for Stuart was an open one that was given by the coroner. Now, by 5:45 a.m, Michael Barrymore has fled the scene. Him and two of the other men flee the scene. I just want to make sure I get it right. I know for definite that one of the other people that fled the scene was Simon Shaw. I'm not sure who the third man was that flees the scene, but what's interesting to note here is that Michael Barrymore rings his manager. I want to make sure I get the name right again, Mike Brown. He calls his manager Mike Brown before he rings the police or the ambulance. There's a dead man in your back garden by the side of your swimming pool and you need to ring your manager first. That doesn't sit very well with me. He was clearly more worried about his reputation than poor Stuart being dead in the back garden. I find that really disturbing. Now, Michael Barrymore might have nothing to do with this. I'm not making any assumptions as to who's guilty here. I'm not certain that it was Michael Barrymore. It could have been his ex-partner. Could have been some of the other men that were there that night. I don't know who it was, so these are all just assumptions that I'm making, but that's quite shady behaviour. What the other witnesses that were there said that night was that once Michael Barrymore had found Stuart was dead, he fled, and before he fled the house, bear in mind it's his house with a party going on. I know it's no longer a party because someone's just been found dead. He went through a few drawers and took a few belongings, seemingly perhaps taking away evidence. Now, there are numerous different reports from the witnesses as to who found Stuart's body. Two of the other men that were there that night claim that they found him dead and not Michael Barrymore. No one can ever be sure of this because there wasn't any CCTV footage from Michael Barrymore's private home. Back in 2001, camera phones weren't all that, and, you know, it obviously wasn't filmed. All we can go by are what the witnesses said. Something to note now is that apparently at least two of the witnesses were paid off. Now, I presume they were paid off by Michael Barrymore. If that's true, that's terrible. Again, I don't know who paid them off, so it could have been the murderer if that wasn't Michael Barrymore. But the fact that Michael Barrymore obviously had quite a lot of money leads me to believe that he may have paid them off, and that's extremely disturbing. Now, the fact that a 50-year-old man in Cheshire has been arrested today, the 17th of March 2021, is great news for Stuart's family. It's great news for Stuart's friends, and I'm really hoping this is going to get some justice and some closure in this case. So basically, come 6 o'clock in the morning, Michael Barrymore has fled the scene. There's a dead man in his back garden. There are people that he's never met before that have gone back to his house for a party that must be traumatised and thinking, what on earth's going on? Now, something I'm going to point out now is that Stuart had numerous post-mortems, or as they're known in America, autopsies carried out on his body, and he had been attacked in a very horrific and savage manner. Not only, I think, had he been beaten, but he had been abused in a way that I don't wish to mention, that I'm sure you can all figure out. Now, obviously, we don't know who abused Stuart, but the injuries that he sustained are some of the most horrific ones I've ever heard of. And it must have been a really awful way to die. So my heart truly goes out to his dad, all of his family, and all of his friends. Now, as I said, numerous post-mortems were carried out on Stuart's body. Each pathologist had differing views. Some thought he drowned, some didn't. Now, there's no proof that he was ever even actually in the swimming pool. Unfortunately, the police bungled this investigation. They should have done tests on the water in the swimming pool, which could have proved if people had recently been swimming in it, and definitely if a dead body had been in it. They didn't carry out those tests. The police should have taken the temperature of the pool to see if it was suitable to be swimming in, because bearing in mind it was the end of March, and the end of March in this country in England is not very warm. As anyone that lives here will know, it's quite chilly here today. Thankfully, the sun is shining though. So the temperature of the pool should have been taken, and apparently the police asked Michael Barrymore's manager, a celebrity's manager, to take the temperature, which he did. Now, I don't know if they watched him do it. I don't think they did. So the reading that he could have given could have been false. Michael Barrymore hadn't used the swimming pool that much. It wasn't a very old swimming pool, and it had been out of action for the winter. He claims that he heated it up for 24 hours, and the temperature that was given wasn't accurate for a pool that had only been heated for 24 hours. They don't think the pool was warm enough to have been swum in, and what they do think is that some of the revellers at the party that night went in the jacuzzi and not the swimming pool. Now, most of the newspapers and media here in the UK reported that Stuart had drowned at Michael Barrymore's house. In fact, all of us were led to believe that Stuart had drowned. Now, after some, quite a lot of research into this case, I don't feel Stuart drowned. I feel he was attacked by one of the men, and I do think it was a man, unfortunately, at Michael Barrymore's house. Now, I don't know if Michael Barrymore was involved in the attack, but I'm sure he knows more than he lets on. The way he was killed was just so savage, and like I said, the fact no one's been caught for it all this time later is just awful. Let's really hope that this arrest that's been made today does bring a conviction, as I said before. So the police continue to investigate. I don't believe they interviewed the people there and then for their witness statements. This is done 3 or 4 days later. I mean, you need to interview people and get their witness statement there and then. I don't care if it's 6 o'clock in the morning. Their minds were fresh with the details of what had just gone on. Why it was left 3 or 4 days, again, I don't know. The thermometer for the pool disappeared, which is quite strange. Now, would that have proven that the pool had not been warmed up to the level that Michael Barrymore claimed it had? Other evidence also went missing. All very strange. Apparently also witnesses said that Michael Barrymore's manager stays on after Michael Barrymore has fled the scene. Bear in mind, poor Stuart Lubbock's body is probably still lying on the floor, and he's running around clearing up evidence, hiding things. So it's no wonder that people in this country have often thought that Michael Barrymore did kill Stuart Lubbock, you know, from the strange way that he behaved afterwards. I suppose we can only put that down to the fact that he was a celebrity. He really, really was a massive, huge celebrity in this country at the time. and his career probably did have another 10 years at least left in it, and from there on in it was ruined, and I guess Michael Barrymore knew that and wanted to get out of there as quick as he could. I'm not sure which, but at least one of the women that were there that night claimed that they heard Michael Barrymore talking about someone being attacked. Now, I'm not going to say what attack, but I think you can get what I mean. I don't mean beating up, I mean that other kind of horrible attack. Now, why they were talking about that, I don't know. At this point, I don't think Stuart's around, so had someone attacked Stuart and Michael Barrymore was aware of it? Did Michael Barrymore's partner, boyfriend, attack him? Or was it one of the other guests that were there that night? I really can't say who I think it was, as I don't know who the person that's been arrested here in England today, the 50-year-old from Cheshire, they've not named him. I don't know who it is. If it is one of the names that I've just read off of that list that I've made of all the people that were there that night, then that's extremely shocking, as it's taken the police 20 years to finally figure it out. I can't imagine it is anybody outside of the group of the people that were at Michael Barrymore's house that night, but it's got to be one of them. It's going to be extremely interesting to see who they are. And what I would like to do, and I may have already done, is seeing the ages of the people that were there that night in 2001, knowing it's exactly 20 years and a fortnight since this tragic murder was carried out, and add up who is now 50 years old. I'm sure you could all do that, but I'm not going to put any names out there. I don't want to get in any trouble, as this 50-year-old that's been arrested may be let off. He's not the first person to be arrested on suspicion of Stuart's murder, or for having something to do with it, some knowledge of it. There have been other arrests made of men in the UK in the last 20 years, but sadly none of them have come to a conviction and to someone doing prison time. Stuart Lubbock's father has campaigned to get justice for his son's murder. He is an extremely sweet man, and it's really tragic watching the news footage of him where he is obviously completely distraught about his son's murder. He's still distraught about it 20 years later, as he's never had any closure. He's never seen any justice. So let's all hope that today's arrest of the 50-year-old man from Cheshire finally gets some justice for Stuart and for his poor dad. Now, after this tragedy happened, Michael Barrymore did go out of the media, out of the TV world. All of his contracts with ITV were terminated. As I said, he then pops up in Celebrity Big Brother, which we were all a bit shocked by, and he does redeem himself, really. He was still the funny man that he always was, the comedian, the entertainer. I'm not surprised that he came second. I was surprised he didn't win it, really, because he really did show that he was still quite a funny guy. But if he has knowledge of this murder, who cares if he's a funny guy? If he knew what happened to Stuart, why didn't he say 20 years ago? Personally, I think he probably does know, and he was trying to save his career, all that money that he earned, all the fame and the acclaim. He didn't want to lose that, and I think he's kept all this inside for the last 20 years. Now, I wonder, after the arrest today, could Michael Barrymore be back in the news? Could he be arrested again? Could the person that's been arrested today give away some news that Michael Barrymore did have knowledge of this, and could we see more arrests than just this one person? I do think that maybe more than one of the people at the party, one of the men, were responsible. Perhaps it was a gang of them that carried out this tragic, horrible, savage murder. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I personally don't think Michael Barrymore had a part in it or was involved, but I do think he knows who did. Now, I don't know if you'd seen, a number of years ago, Michael Barrymore did a show with another famous celebrity in our country called Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan interviewed him, and he outright denied having any knowledge. He acted quite strangely, even broke down and cried. Not sure I really bought the tears, they seemed a bit fake. And I found him a bit disturbing throughout the whole interview. In fact, he seemed to be a completely changed man. He was a former, a shadow of his former self, of the funny, entertaining man that I saw on the telly in the 90s every Saturday night. He turned into this really strange, twisted individual that clearly knew more than he was letting on. You could tell from the things that he said and from his body language that he was lying. He seemed really tense, and to be honest, I'm not sure why he did the programme, because I don't think it painted him in any better light. Everybody in the UK had still turned against him.
From the heights of fame to rock bottom, you had a very long way to fall. In the late 90s, Michael was still riding high as Mr. Primetime. He'd also found new love with 24-year-old city broker Sean Davis.
Love is the answer.
Sean was an absolute pucker sweetheart. He really was.
Well, I'm here in the heart of Scotland with Michael Barrymore and his 24-year-old partner, Sean Davis. At the end of all those storms that he'd been through, I just thought, oh gosh, he's found home at last. Here's some Sean's plans where they wanted to adopt. Do you mention children there?
The process going through, but when the circumstances are right, yes, I would.
Michael said if the time's right, you can't. I think there's got to be that quality time as well with the kid.
Sean had calmed him down a bit, although if he was determined to drink and take substances, then you can't control that.
No one really controlled Michael. Michael controlled Michael.
But in late 2000, after 2 years together, Sean and Michael split up, and Michael got together with estate agent John Kenny. 3 months later, after a night out clubbing, they invited a group of men and women back to Michael's house for a party.
It was all quiet at Michael Barrymore's home today. On Friday night, he'd been at the Millennium Club in Harlow with friends. But just hours later, 31-year-old Stuart Lubbock was found unconscious in Barrymore's swimming pool.
As the story unfolded, a post-mortem revealed severe internal injuries to the dead man.
Couldn't take it in at first, what on earth was going on.
A horrendous situation for everyone.
It just escalated and escalated.
Michael's behaviour on the night was also under scrutiny.
When I found out that Michael had run away, I knew that was the wrong thing to do, having worked for the police for 25 years.
The detectives investigating the death of Stuart Lubbock on March the 31st have made 3 arrests this morning.
The police arrested Michael's boyfriend and another man on suspicion of murder and then released them without charge. Michael was also arrested and cautioned on drug offences.
Stories crept out bit by bit. Drink and drugs had been found in Stuart Lubbock's blood. And Flint Street, this was a bean feast, I'm afraid.
In 2002, there was an inquest where Michael abstained from comment.
Barrymore exercised his right not to answer questions about drugs at the inquest.
And remember, this is the guy, the star, that had always been open, friendly to everybody.
The coroner recorded an open verdict.
I've been unable to determine how exactly Stuart came to his death.
With the case still open, in 2006, Essex police launched a second inquiry, eventually arresting Michael and 2 other men from the night on suspicion of serious sexual assault and murder.
We remain committed to finding out the truth of what happened that night. Someone knows, and I hope their conscience to do the right thing will eventually prevail.
I've been asking for years for this to be done, and to bring it to a conclusion, essentially for Stuart's family and for myself.
All 3 were released without charge. But the damage to Michael's career seemed irreversible.
I'm not sure there's ever been a fall like it from someone who was loved. A father's son, and a dad died, and that brings its own tragedy. And I know Michael feels that. I know he feels it.
I heard that he was on suicide watch, so I went down, and it was just awful. It really was. Because I just felt so sorry for him. I really did. And I thought he was just a broken man. He really was.
Tough to watch. A good friend of yours talking that way about you.
A friend, yeah.
I mean, talk me through what happened that night.
Yeah.
People were drinking, taking drugs?
They're all having drinks. They said, oh, can we go in the jacuzzi? So I said, yeah, I've got to put the lights on, because otherwise you won't see where you're going. And then I went out there and had a try. And as we walked out, I looked down and there's Stuart floating in the pool. Or whether he's floating, when you see that, it's a very surreal thing to see.
And what went through your mind?
I just went into a bit of shock. I just went, oh, Christ. It's quite obvious he wasn't moving much. The first thing I did when I said it was run back into the house and get help from Jonathan, who I knew had lifeguard experience. They came out and started resuscitating him. I ran back. Now, this is something I want to clear up. I did not flee the house. I did not flee and suggest I was running away. I phoned Mike Brown, my PA, my personal assistant, and I said, There's been a problem at the house, told him what had happened. It's going to be surrounded by press. Yes, I should have stayed. I should have said, no, I need to be here. But we can all do should haves after the event. And yes, I should have. I didn't. I'd like to, if you could bear with me. This is a copy of the letter. This letter, do you mind if I read it?
Sure.
And this is from the Crown Prosecution Service. I've never read this out or brought this out before because it's only come to light. The 10th of September 2007. There was no evidence upon which to charge any person either for the death of Stuart Lubbock or the injuries he sustained to his rectum. Michael Parker, me, has an alibi from 3 people in the period immediately prior to the discovery of Stuart in the pool. I therefore conclude that there is insufficient evidence against all 3 suspects for there to be proceedings concerning the death of Stuart Lubbock or relating to the injury.
The truth about this, Michael, isn't it, is that we may never know the truth.
Yes.
You were there. What do you take responsibility for?
I was responsible for allowing people to come back to my house and go out to the pool. You would assume was capable of looking after themselves.
I mean, I understand how you feel and the passionate way that you defend yourself. But I guess objectively...
But if I don't defend myself, I've got people that go around
I get it.
making all sorts of allegations.
I get it. But what I would say is this, that I guess you have to start, don't you, from the position that this young man, this father of 2 kids...
No, I'm getting to that. Hang about. I'm getting to that. You haven't let me finish.
Right.
That family deserve proper answers, okay? No parent should have to bury their young. I had nothing to do with what happened to Stuart. I am innocent. I am not 99.9% innocent. I am 100% innocent, and I am entitled to walk around with my head held high for the rest of my life.
But let me ask you this, Michael. How do you think Stuart died?
I think he drowned.
There are still some people, for whatever reason, that don't believe it. What do you say to them?
I have to go around and live my life. If they've got anything to say to me, they can say it to me personally. And I'll give them an answer personally.
But do you believe there are people out there that know the answer?
But I have to, because there's no answer anywhere else. And yet all that's happened over all these years is that it was convenient, you know, and some of the journalism. You showed one of the headlines there, gay orgy. How do you have a gay orgy with 4 girls and 5 blokes, 3 of them are straight? How do you?
Stuart was found with various drugs in his body, and you were asked directly if you had facilitated him taking drugs, and you declined to answer. What was the truth about that?
Well, I didn't facilitate him taking drugs, but I was advised that by my lawyers at the time. You don't have to answer in a coroner's court. You can just... I said, well, I'm going to just say, I didn't.
But again, with hindsight, do you...
I mean, I
you see that...
No, yes, but you can see lots of things in hindsight. Yeah. I'm not making excuses.
No, but I'm saying the reason that...
I fucked up. What more do you want? I fucked up.
I get it. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I couldn't be more sorry.
Look, Stuart will never get his life back, but you will never get the comfort of this being resolved, because it's hard to see how it will be.
And I have to live in hope.
Now, as I said, I really hope that Stuart Lubbock family gets some justice for his tragic death. I really hope this arrest today gains more traction in the media. I hope we get a name of the person, if they are going to actually be brought to justice for any involvement in Stuart's tragic death. Let's really hope that this cold case that's now nearly 20 years old in a fortnight has finally been solved. Anyway, guys, I hope you're all keeping safe. It's sunny here in Cambridge today in England, which is making me smile and feel a bit better about life. In about a month's time, or just under a month's time, really, lockdown will be easing. We'll be allowed to go up the pub or a restaurant. We'll be allowed to buy clothes from the shops. Really, I'll be officially allowed to see my family and my friends again. And I'm really hoping that I might get a holiday in the next couple of months, because I haven't been for nearly a year. Anyway, I'm sure people out there have got a lot more problems than me and my lack of holidays, but I hope you're keeping well. I hope that none of your family and friends have been affected by this dreadful coronavirus. I really hope you're enjoying my videos. I'm enjoying making them. They're making me feel a lot happier doing this throughout this lockdown, as I had been feeling quite down a few months ago. So doing this has given me a new zest for life, and I'm glad that all of you have been enjoying the videos. Thanks for all of your comments so far. Thanks to all my new subscribers. As I always say, like and subscribe. Tell your friends about my channel if they like true crime. I try to upload 2 or 3 videos every week. I know I haven't got as much paranormal stuff out as I'd like to, because I wanted to try and do more true crime stuff to start with, but I will be putting out a few ghosty type videos in the next fortnight for all you paranormal fans out there. So I'm going to try and keep up with the paranormal, the true crime, and I'm also really enjoying doing the body language and statement analysis of true crime cases too. Anyway guys, take care, and I'll be back very soon with a new video. Take care now. Bye bye.